All right, now we're going to get into this session, which is Introduction to Functions. This is awesome. So we're going to start off with what are functions, defining our own functions. We're going to learn about input functions. We're going to continue our discussion on concatenation, as well as casting, and we're going to learn much more. So we're going to start off with just a brief introduction to the study group, and then we're going to launch into our live coding. We'll start with a refresher, and then we'll work through those concepts together. All right, so welcome to the study group. If you did not join us for session one or just would like this reminder. So anyway, whether you're new to the Python language, programming and or computer science, or if you're just looking for a refresher today, you are welcome here. During this series, we will actively code together in real time. We're going to move at a slow and steady pace to absorb the material. And we're going to encourage others as we learn in a safe and comfortable environment. And I hope we're going to have lots of fun. So we're going to focus on learning the essentials of Python programming. Here is our content session roadmap. So we already had session 1 2 weeks ago where we covered an introduction to Python and simple data types. Today we're covering intro to functions, and then in coming sessions we're going to tackle concepts such as if-else statements, for and while loops, and we're going to revisit functions, which is a session I'm really looking forward to. We're going to talk about parameters and returns, which isn't always seems to be covered in beginner sessions. So I'm really excited about that one. And we also have as kind of a second part to our study group, which is called collaborative sessions, which, as I mentioned, Shermaine is organizing. And we're going to implement these concepts, as well as we're going to cover additional concepts such as using a library, recursive functions, text files, and it's going to be in a very interactive group coding type format. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're really looking forward to it. So as you can see here, our content sessions, here we are on July 29th, and these sessions are all Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern US time. And if you've registered for session 1 or session 2, you're already registered for all 5. Now, if you're planning to join us for the collaborative sessions, those are going to be on a different day of the week. So those will be Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern on these dates. And registration is going to be limited and separate for each session, which will, this is because the sessions are going to be very interactive. And if you attend our content sessions, you're going to receive registration links early. So we're going to be a little bit later in the session. We're actually going to be sending out that first collaborative Zoom link. So you'll want to stick around for the session for a little bit, and we'll be sure to share that with you. All right. Actually, Shermaine, did we decide that we wanted to share it at the start of the session?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I forgot. So actually, Shubi, if you could pop in the chat that first registration link. So this is an early registration. This has not opened up to everyone just yet. So you guys are the first for attending our content sessions. You will have the opportunity to register soon. And for those asking whether there's going to be a live coding notebook, that will be shared in just a moment. Shubi, were you able to find that okay? Okay. So Shubi will share that. So Shubi will share the early registration link for the collab while I continue the session here. All right. There any questions in the chat that I should respond to before moving on? So someone asked about whether they could join the Python Libraries 101 As a beginner, yes, absolutely. Please register and join us. And those sessions are awesome. Okay. Okay, so time for some live coding. All right, time for some live coding. So today we are going to use Google Colab Notebook. Shubi, please share the link in the chat. Perfect. And although we're going to use Google Colab Notebook, if you instead would prefer to use your favorite IDE or code editor, and you already have Python 3 and that IDE code editor installed on your computer, you can feel free to use that. Some of the popular ones are Visual Studio Code, PyCharm, Anaconda, Atom, and Sublime. All right. All right, please give me a thumbs up or a B in the chat if you have your Colab open and you're ready to go. Fantastic. Awesome. You guys know the drill at this point. Fantastic. Okay, so just be sure to go to File, save a copy in Drive. For me, it wants to open in a new tab. So that's the version we'll work off of, and I'll close out of the original. Okay, everyone's ready? Looks like everyone's ready to go. Fantastic. Okay. So we're going to start off with just like a review refresher from session 1. So I always find it's helpful just to review the concepts before adding on to those concepts. So we're going to be using these concepts that we learned again today. So comments help us communicate the purpose of our code. Comments are hidden and will not execute or print out to the user when our code runs. We write comments using a hashtag, and this is an example of a comment. So comments, like I mentioned before, are very important. So other programmers or even our future selves can understand what our code means, a week or a month or a year later, and whatnot. So. And if you have any questions, please be sure to post them in the Q&A or the chat, and Karen and Shubi will be responding throughout the session. All right, so print function will print or show data to the user. The print function is written as print with data placed between the parentheses. And these are a few examples of print function. And so please feel free to click that run button. And usually when you start running something the first time in Colab, it does take just a couple of seconds. But you can see here, we have like an integer, we have a float, we have a string with some different characters in it. This one with a apostrophe, this with the double quotes, and you can see they all print out here. All right, so strings is a series of characters which can include letters, numbers, and special characters. So you can see we have strings using single quotes or one apostrophe, double quotes, or 3 apostrophes or triple single quotes. And we, in the first session, wrote a function that prints hello world to the user. Go ahead and hit that run button. Here we go, it prints hello world. How's everyone doing so far? Is everyone seeing everything okay? Shermaine, is everything showing up okay? There's no freezing of my screen or anything like that?
Everything looks good.
All right, thank you. All right, perfect. All right, variables, one of my favorite topics. Variables are pieces of memory that store data. When code runs into a variable, Python retrieves the value assigned to the variable for the function or task being executed. We create a variable by using an equal sign to assign a value. So here are a few examples. We have a variable with just a single letter. We have a variable that's one word. And then we have a variable that's women who code with underscores in between, and that's known as snake case. And they're all set equal to the number of members that we have at Women Who Code. And here we have an example. We created a variable called coding, assigned it to string value yay, and then we print coding. Here's what happens. All right, so integers are whole numbers. They have no decimal points and they can be positive or negative. Here's a number of examples. And I also created a variable called awesome integer. I set it to -300 and we printed out. And then finally, floating point numbers, also known as floats, are numbers with decimal points. They can be positive or negative. And here are some examples: 3.14155926, 1.0, and I created a variable called awesome float, set it equal to 3.14, and we print it out. Okay, so how's everybody doing? All right. Great. So now we get to some new content. So introduction to functions. So in session 1, we learned about several Python functions. These are known as built-in Python functions. So you don't have to create them or write them. They're already in your Python. So the first one we used the print function. We use something called len, which refers to length. We were finding the length of string values. We have the string function. And then we also checked for type of, so data type, using that function. So functions are blocks of code that run when called and perform a specific task. Functions are beneficial because we can reuse code for repetitive tasks. So, if you're going to create a function that does a mathematical equation, you don't have to write that piece of code over and over and over again. You can just create a function. And every time you want to do a number plus a number, it'll automatically execute for you. And when defining our own functions, we begin with the def keyword followed by the function name, parentheses, and a colon. We're going to review some examples in a moment. Function names can be a word or several words separated by underscores in that snake case. So just like we did with variables, where we used a word or several words, we're doing the same basic idea here. So when you're going to define a function, you'll start with that def, you'll put a space, you'll create whatever you want to name your function, and then you'll do your opening and closing parentheses and then a colon. And so this is the basic format to get started with your function. And also, it's important to keep in mind that indentation is very important in Python. So if you look at this example here, you notice that we define a function and then information or the data that goes within that function is indented. And this is by clicking tab, the tab key on your keyboard. Okay. Oops, my apologies. Okay, so our first example of a function. So we defined a function called main, and within the main function, I wrote a print function that prints hello world to the user. And as I mentioned, you want to remember to indent here. And this piece of code here, I don't want you guys to worry about this because it's a bit technical, but just so you understand, this is basically just telling Python like which function we would like to start with. So this is going to become very important later on when we start discussing parameters and returns. That we'll want to tell Python like, okay, we want to start with this function, and then we're going to have many other things happening underneath it. It's going to go to other functions. And so we're just going to practice today with some basic functions, but just make sure that if you see this piece of code in here, that you keep it there, otherwise you will get an error. So we're going to practice this together. So we're going to define a function called new main. We're just going to do something a little bit different. And then we're going to print hello world to the user. And so we're basically going to copy this example, but make a couple of changes. And just keep in mind here, so this function up here is called main. And as you can see here, this is also called main. So they are this is the starting function. This is we're telling Python this is a starting function. So down here you can see this already says new main, and so you don't need to adjust it at all because we're just going to practice writing def space new underscore main parentheses colon. And then we're going to hit enter, and it automatically indented for us. So Colab read that, hey, you're defining a function and you probably want to put some information under it. And so it automatically indented for you. So you can just start writing print parentheses. I'll do a double quotes for my string. You can do single quote if you prefer, and then write hello world. And then when you have that, click run and see if you get this result. Let me know in the chat if you printed it out correctly or if you need any help. Awesome job. Awesome job, everyone. Fantastic. So I think we're ready to continue. Great. So in this next example, we can see a different function. So in this one, we created a function called add two numbers, then created two variables. So as you can see, we started with the def, created a function called add two numbers. You can see the general formatting here, and then the indent. Here is the first variable, which I called number one, very creative. I assigned that to an integer, and then number two, assign that to an integer, and then print, as you can see, everything's in line here and everything's indented, print, and then parentheses, number one plus number two. And down here, you can see that this is all set to go. Everything aligns. So we hit run. And you can see that Python did that math for us. So we are going to, if everyone is good, practice writing this. So we're going to practice writing this, but we're going to do one that's multiplication instead. So you're going to write def, and then you're going to write multiply 2 numbers, parentheses, colon, then hit enter. You can also just do MULT if you would like. I'm writing everything out for us today. And then you're going to do, let's do number underscore 1 equals, it's just try not to set it to too high of a number. Otherwise Python might take a couple minutes to respond. And then we'll set it to a value. Let's do number underscore 2. We'll set that equal to a value, an integer value. And then we're going to print parentheses number underscore 1 multiplication number underscore 2. Then we just spot check, make sure everything looks like it is correct, and then hit that run function. Is everyone good? Did everyone get the desired result? Wonderful. Fantastic. All right. Everyone's working so hard. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, if we're ready to move on to input functions, these are a lot of fun. So input functions ask the user to provide information. The input function is written as input and then the parentheses. We will put questions formatted as strings between the parentheses. So in our examples. All right, so this first example, we created a variable called name, and then we use the equal sign. So the same basic format. And then for the value, we're going to put this input function. And then you see the opening, the opening and closing parentheses. And inside that function, we do double quotes, what is your name, and double quotes. And then we're going to print name. So you can see that Colab has given us our question. So what is your name? And then a convenient box to type our name. So go ahead and type your name or whatever name you would like, and then hit enter. And you can see that it read the name and it's printed it out right here. So we are going to practice that. So write name equals input parentheses, double quote, enter your name. Or you can write what is your name if you prefer. And then you're going to print this variable that we just created called name. Okay, so your code should look like this. And then click run. Enter your name. Does anybody want me to say hi to them? Anyone? Oh, okay. Fernanda. So we enter and then we hit enter and it prints out Fernanda. Fantastic. So in this next example, we created a variable called fave underscore food. So, and then we did equals input, enter your favorite food, colon. And so I love food, so I had to do a food one. And then we print that variable. So run that, enter your favorite food. Well, I'm going to put rice because everybody knows that's my favorite food. So you can see it prints out here, and then we're going to try practicing writing our example. So I'm going to write out favorite food equals input parentheses. What is your favorite food? And could somebody let me know in the chat, whoever's first, what their favorite food is? And we can print pickles. Oh, pickles are great. What a great choice. Okay, so let's run that. Oh, okay, good. It's working. And we're going to write pickles. Hit enter. And we can see pickle. So we can see that pickles printed out. Fantastic. Oh, a lot of good foods here. Yum. Okay. I'm going to be very hungry after this session from reading all these food ideas. So let me know with a B or a thumbs up. Is everyone good to go? Everyone's happy with the input functions? Shubi, were you able to find the link to the first collab session and share that with everyone? I'm sorry, I haven't been able to follow the chat the whole time. Shubi, can you just let me know in the chat, yes or no? Okay, perfect. All right, fantastic, awesome. Thank you so much, Shubi, for doing that. Really appreciate it. Fantastic. All right. We're going to go back to concatenation. Who remembers concatenation? Who remembers from session 1? Yes. And if you didn't attend session 1 or you don't remember, that's totally fine too. No worries. We're going to go over it again. So, okay. So this time we're going to do some input functions and concatenation together. And we're going to combine these two concepts as we're starting to build together a lot of these concepts and take our coding to the next level. All right, so in session 1, we practiced concatenation by creating a variable, assigning a string value to it, and then concatenating with other strings. So here's a string, here's a variable, and here's another string. Now we are going to create variables, but we're going to get the values basically for our variables by using input functions, and then we're going to concatenate the result using the print function. All right. So here we did this example in session 1. So we created a variable called name, and then we set it equal to a string value that was our name or our cat's name or our partner or friend's name, whatever name that we wanted. And then we created a print function. And then we did double quotes, hi, comma, space, double quotes. And then we did, sorry about that. Then we did a space, a plus sign, a space, the name variable, a space, plus sign, space, and then we did a string value in double quotes for the exclamation point. And let's run that. And this is how it printed out. And just be mindful of where you would like your spaces to exist. So in this case, we wanted a space after our comma and before the name, but we did not want a space here. So the exclamation point would appear right after our names. And so now we're going to practice an example where we're following that same basic thing, but instead of putting the string value into that variable directly, instead we're going to use an input function. And so we can ask the user what their name is and get that assigned. So you can see here we have name equals input. What is your name? Print, and then it appears exactly the same. Hi, name, exclamation point. So let's run it. And I'm going to go back and see if anybody wants their name mentioned. Let me know. Okay, I see someone. So what is your name? We put that in there and then we hit enter and then it says hi. All right. And we have some, if we want to run it again, you just run it again and we can put another name in there. And we can say hi to Michelle and we can say hi to everyone. So hi to one more person here. Hello. All right. Anyway, that was fun. All right. So now we're going to practice writing the code. And so we do name equals input, parentheses, enter, oops, do our double quotes, enter your name. And again, you don't have to put a space here. I just like how it puts a space in for me visually. So that's what I like to do. And then we do print. We do double quote, or you can do single quotes if you prefer. We do hi, comma, space. And then we're going to do space plus space, name, space plus double quote, exclamation point. So just make sure that your code lines up with this example here, and you can put whatever you want as the what is your name question. You can do enter your name or what is your name. They both do the same basic idea. And then hit run. Okay, seems to be working. Great. Does anybody else want their name mentioned? Okay, somebody does. Great. And so we put the name in here and we can see that it printed out correctly. Okay, fantastic. So how did everyone do? Does everyone get the desired result? Awesome. So there's a question about the collab session. So Shubi, I'm not sure if you go kind of towards the bottom of the sheet that I gave you, there is something I started with early registration link for collab. That's the post that everyone is looking for in order to get registered for our collab session 1. Okay, that looks like it. Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. So everyone, Shubi has posted the Zoom link for your collab session 1. So please feel free to save that. Although registrations are limited, there aren't so many people that you need to stop right now and register necessarily. So just be sure to save that link and register at some point, within the next couple hours or whatnot. So anyway, back to coding. All right, so this is kind of a big example that we have here. So it's not as scary as it might look at first glance. So basically we're kind of combining a lot of these concepts. So we're defining a function, and then we're also doing some variables with input functions, and then we're concatenating. So we just need to kind of break it up in our mind into 3 distinct steps in order to create it. So, and we're going to walk through it together. So we start off and we do our DEF. And then for this function, we decide to name it pet1 underscore data. We did our parentheses and our colon. And now we're going to define we're going to create 3 variables, pet1 underscore type, pet1 underscore name, pet1 underscore age. For each one, we're going to do an input function. So we do the same basic idea. We do our input, parentheses, and then we put a string here asking the user for 3 pieces of information. So when Python executes it, it's going to execute this first question first, allow the user to input. And then once the user inputs that, it will go on to the next one and then the next one. And then from there, it will move to our print functions. And so here we're concatenating. And so we're doing print your plus pet1 type plus apostrophe s name is pet name, pet1 underscore name in a period. And then here we're doing name is age years old. So this will make a little bit more sense when I run it. So go ahead and hit that run button. So we're going to do, what type of animal is your pet? Now I feel like I give an awful lot of cat, love in the last session. So I'm going to instead do a dog here, even though I don't have a dog. I would love to have a dog. And so what is your pet's name? We're going to name him Charlie. And how old is your pet? Let's have him be 11 years old. All right, and you can see here it says your dog's name is Charlie. Charlie is 11 years old. All right, and I'm just gonna click this X here so I can more easily see as I'm typing down here what we're following. So we're going to follow the same basic example, but don't type the 1. And the reason I did this is because Colab kind of can read between different cells. So like whatever you execute here, if you've run it, it can kind of read down to the next one. And so I just wanted to create a different function name here so we know that we got it correct. So we're going to do DEF. We're going to do pet underscore data, parentheses, colon. So we're doing our same basic start. And then you're going to hit enter. It's automatically indented for you. And then you're going to do pet type equals. And you can kind of create your 3 variables as you work. You could also just start writing input if you want to. Sometimes I find it easier to just write out all my variables this way and then go back and put in. So you can do either way, whatever works for you. So we did pet underscore name and we're doing pet underscore age equals. All right, now we're going to do input. And then we're going to do what type of animal is your pet? Input. What's your pet's name? And we're going to do input. What is your, I like to write what is. You can do whatever you want. What is your pet's age in years? Okay. Does everyone have that part? Okay. Everyone's doing a great job. Okay, so you don't need to put this space here. I'm doing it just because it's easier for me, but you can just continue here. Just make sure you click that tab key so you indent, and then we're going to write our print functions. So the first one, all right. So the first one we're going to do double quote your with a space, then do space plus space pet type space plus, we'll do our double quotes again, apostrophe S, name is space, end of the double, your second double quote there, do a space, do a plus, pet underscore name, space plus space, and then we'll do our double quote with a period. And so just spot check and make sure that you typed your print function to look like the one above it. And then we're going to do our second print function here. So we're going to do pet underscore name, space plus space, double quote, space is space. After the double quote, we'll do a space plus space again, and then we'll do pet underscore age, space plus space. And then we'll do double quote, do a space, years old. All right. Whew. So I'll give you all a moment. Let me know if you're caught up. Everyone good? So a lot of people are asking why we need this. We had talked about that earlier in the session. So basically, this part is telling Python where to start. So this part here, and I'm not going to explain the whole code, but just understand as you know that basically this is telling Python start here at this function. And so you can see it's when this file opens, you're putting this whole piece of code at the bottom of your code, and you're saying to Python, I want to start executing code at this function. So then Python goes here and says, okay, this is where I need to start. And then we'll go through and start executing your code. And like I mentioned earlier, this will be beneficial later because we're going to be defining functions, and then we're going to be creating our own functions, and we're going to be putting them here. And then we're going to be writing out, you know, what those functions execute, but that's going to come a little bit later. We're not going to tackle that, quite today. This is an introduction to functions. So stay tuned on that and continue attending our sessions because we are going to get to that part. A lot of that, I will say, a lot of that will be covered during our session 5. We're really going to dig in deep on some more, like understanding functions and how do they talk to each other. And so that one's going to be really exciting. Like, I can't wait to get to that session, honestly. Not that I want these to be over. I definitely don't, but so yeah. All right, perfect. So, all right, fantastic. So everyone gave me their thumbs up. So we're going to go ahead and execute, and let's see how we did. Whew, I'm very nervous. I always get very nervous I did things correctly. So what type of pet do we want to do? Should we do a cat? We'll do a cat. Okay, what do we want to name the cat? All right, somebody said Sarah. Oh, that is so pretty. Okay, So we're going to name the cat Sarah. And how old would we like Sarah to be? 2. Okay. All right. So your cat's name is Sarah. Sarah is 2 years old. Oh, so cute. All right. Fantastic. All right. So I did want to make a point here. So this is a very important note. So note that the input function automatically converts the inputted values into strings. So if you're inputting an integer like 2, or you're inputting a float like 2.0 or 2.5, the input function is automatically reading and understanding that piece of code as a string, or a piece of that value that you're inputting, I should say, as a string. So that's why when we concatenated, we didn't need to convert this to a string. If for those of you who attended session 1, you remember that we had integers and we had to write the string, here to convert it. But because our value used an input function, it said, oh, okay, you're saying the cat is 2 years old, so I'm going to read that as 2. So it's reading it like a string like this. It's not reading it as an integer. Does that make sense? Okay. Perfect. And so, yes, and that's why we concatenated these strings together without any error, because they were all in fact strings. Awesome. All right, is everybody good with input functions and concatenation? Can I get thumbs up? So if anybody has any issue, please feel free to, pop your code maybe in the chat, and Karen and Shubi will have a look at that and let you know if there's a way to fix your code so it runs. All right. Everyone's doing well. All right, now we're going to work on something called constructor functions. And so, as I just mentioned, we didn't have to do that str, parentheses around the pet age. And so when you do that type of thing, so like we're doing str around a 2, and it's converting an integer of 2 to a string. Hold on one second. So this is called, so let me go back to this. So in session 1, we practiced concatenation with a variable when a variable is assigned to an integer or float value. Since we cannot concatenate an integer or a float with a string, we demonstrated how to specify the type using the string function. So I want to explore this concept a little bit further. So using the str, int, or float function constructs a string, integer, or float type. This is called casting, and these functions are called constructor functions. So as you can see, this is one of the examples that we did in the session. We created a variable, we called it rice, or you could put your favorite food there, whatever you would like, and we set it to an integer value. And then we did concatenation, I would like, and then we did str around the rice, orders of rice, please, because we can't concatenate with an integer here when we have strings. It's going to give you an error. So if one of them is a string, they all have to be strings. So we did that. And it said, I would like 2 orders of rice, please. So work correctly in this instance. So we're going to practice a few examples similarly to this, but we're not going to go through all the concatenation and everything again, because I think we all need a little break from concatenation for the time being. So here we created a variable called a, and we set it to a float value. What I love about, Colab here is you can see that when I hover over the variable, it's saying variable. The variable is called A and it's a float. It's telling me right here it's a float. It makes life kind of, a little bit easier. So anyway, we set A to a float value. And then here we did print, parentheses, INT, parentheses, A. And what we're trying to do here is we want to take this A value here and convert it to an integer. So if you click that run button, what happens? Okay, it's saying, let's convert 3.14 to an integer. And so it converts it downwards to a 3. And then here's another example where we set B to a string value. And we click print and it gives us a 3. Now, if you want to, you can take all of this and you can write in, like your type and check it, because it's not always obvious on these ones. So let's practice one. Let's do kitty equals, say somebody did some statistics and they got kind of a funny number like this. And we want to convert it to an integer. So let's do print. Let's convert it to, well, I keep saying convert. I mean to say construct, because we're not actually changing the value of kitty at all. It's still a float, but we're constructing an integer. And so we're going to write kitty here. And you can see that it took the float and it constructed an integer. Is everyone good so far? Okay. Let's continue. So we're going to construct the float using the float. And so we have a C equal to an integer value. And then we use the float. And you can see that it converts it to a 3.0. And then here we're using a string again in constructing a float. And it converts it to 3.0. So let's do another one. Kitty cat equals 23. Print. We're going to do a float. We're going to do kitty cat. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Now we're just going to do the same thing with strings. So we have an integer of 3 and we're going to construct a string. And here we have a float and we're going to construct a string. And then we can do an example. Kitty 1 equals 3.0. And then we're going to print string. All right. How's everyone doing? See a lot of thumbs up. Okay, awesome. All right. So we're going to work through some larger examples. So here we created a variable called cats. We assigned an integer value to it. And then we're going to check the type of cats. And then we're printing, we're constructing string over cats. And as you can see, so this first print function, we're checking the type. I mean, it's an integer. We know it's a 100. And then here we're printing cats as a string. And the reason I'm doing this is because I wanted to help us understand something. So note that we did not actually change the type of value assigned to the cats variable. So we did not, when we printed here, we did not actually change this variable. This variable here is still assigned to an integer value. And so that is what's going to, that is what lives here. So if we print type cats, we can see that it is in fact still an integer. So we talked about how cells talk to each other. So this is going back and it's reading type cats. It's not reading this. Python is reading cats equals 100, and then it's returning here. So this is kind of important to know. So if we wanted to create a variable, I mean, you could, if you really wanted to, I guess you could just say cats equals, you know, string, you know, 100, but, or you could go back and change the value to cats equals double quote or single quote 100, but you might not want to, you know, disrupt your code and keep, you know, disrupt those variables. So instead you could create like a brand new variable, and then you could use this for different purposes. So for example, here we started off the same. So we have cats equals 100, and then we're creating a new variable called cats underscore str. And then we're setting that equal to the string function with cats, the cats variable. And so we're going to print this resulting value, and then we're going to check the type. So as you can see here, first we printed this result here. So we can see that it's a 100. And then when we check the type, we can see that it is a string. So does that make sense to everyone? And now I put a practice in here, but I think given the time, we should probably move to the putting it all together example, just for the sake of time. And so we've learned a lot of concepts here over the past couple weeks. So I do see a question about going over it one more time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this final example. And if we have a few minutes after this session, I'll stop the recording and we can kind of go back and talk through some of these things as well. But for the sake of time, I think we need to continue. I hope that's okay. So the following example, we're going to wrap up. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So this final example, we're going to just wrap up our understanding of these concepts. So we're defining functions, we're using input functions, we're doing casting and constructor functions, and concatenation. And so this example is kind of big. So we start off here and we're defining average two numbers. So why don't we, I think we do have some time. So just copy that main part and then start your code with the DEF average two numbers, parentheses, colon, hit enter, type print. And then I'm just going to write a shortened version, or actually, let's just copy and paste. Let's make our lives easier. Copy. I'm just going to copy the string part. Okay. Now we're going to do user num1 equals. Now, as we talked about this. Can anyone guess why I put an INT here? And I'm just going to start typing while responses come in. So integer All right, you got it. You got it. Great. So fantastic. All right. So what we're doing is a lot of you got this, great job, is because the input function is taking that input and it's automatically understanding that to be a string. We're converting it to an integer. And the reason is because we're going to do some math. So we need that these numbers to be integers so we can do our math. So we're going to do input, enter first number. You don't have to write all of what I have up here. You can keep it nice and simple for the sake of time. User num2 equals integer, int, input, enter second number. Okay. So we have that part done. We have the first 3 lines of code done. How's everyone doing? Everyone's doing good. All right, perfect. So let's go on to the next part here. So now we're going to create a new variable called average. And we're going to do some math here. User, we're going to start with a parentheses. We're going to do user num1. And we're going to add user num2. And then we're going to divide it by 2. Now, can anyone tell me why I put a parentheses around user num1 plus user num2? Okay, awesome. Yep. Fantastic. All right. So you guys know, like, the order of operations and that sort of thing. So yeah, PEMDAS. So I didn't cover that in the last session due to time, but we do follow that order of operations. So in this instance, when we're taking an average, we want to be sure to add up or get the sum of those 2 numbers first before we divide it by 2. But due to order of operations, it always wants to do division before it does addition. So we're just telling the code we want to do this action first. So that is correct. Great job, everyone. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And then we're going to do a print. And then we're going to do double quote, the average of space. Then we're going to do space plus space. Can't see it because it's giving me, it's trying to help me out, but okay. And then we're going to do str user num1. Make sure we do our spaces. We're going to do string user num2. And I know it's trying to help me, but it's not helping me at the moment. Sorry about that. Average. Okay. Sorry about that. I was fighting all the helpful things that Python was giving me. All right. Perfect. So it should look like this if we did it correctly. We did the string, the average of plus, and then we do string user num1 plus and plus string user num2 plus is plus string average plus the period. And now let's see if we got it correct. I got an error. What did I do? Average to number. Fantastic. Awesome. Sometimes it's so basic. Sometimes it's just a spelling mistake or something like that. So thank you for catching that. Okay, someone's asking why we need to add string here. And so this goes back to the section that we just very recently covered, where we converted here, the input function brought in a string values. We converted those string values to an integer value. So num1 and num2 become integer values, and then we do math. So, for the average part. So here, this is an integer, and user num2 is an integer, and the average is an integer. And because we cannot concatenate integers with strings, we must convert to a string. And so we do that using the str. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. Thank you for that question. So, all right, so let's enter a number. We're just going to enter the number 10, the number 44, and it says the average of 10 and 44 is 27.0. And so that wraps up that part. So is everybody good? Did everyone get the desired result? Awesome. Perfect. All right, great job, everyone. Awesome. So that was our big coding masterpiece of today. So please, everyone, just give yourself a gigantic round of applause, because that was truly amazing. And you wrote a really good, piece of code here. And I'm very excited. So, but before we close out the session, I just want to cover a couple quick things. And yeah, so please, everyone, just stick around a little bit longer. So up next for session 3, that's going to be August 12th, 8 p.m. Eastern US time. We're going to explore if-else statements. We're probably also going to explore Boolean values off the record. So anyway, so please be sure to join our Beginner Python study group Slack channel, ask questions between sessions, and please, everyone, keep practicing. So you can, at any point where you want to practice something more, go right here in Colab and click code, and it will give you a whole new cell. So you can just keep practicing different variations of the code throughout the week, and it'll save it all in here for you, and you can try things out. And if you get errors, try to understand what happened there, and you can join us in Slack and say, hey, I tried writing this and I got an error. Can somebody please help me out? And we'd be really glad to help you out. So again, excellent work today, everyone. Fantastic job. We're going to cover, like I've mentioned already, we're going to cover functions more in session 5. We're going to continue using functions a little bit every week. We're kind of adding on as we go to the different pieces. So we're learning things and we're going to keep adding on. So we're going to continue using these functions. We're going to keep defining functions every session. So please practice throughout the week. But session 5, we're going to cover parameters and returns. And this is going to be really exciting. So like below is an example of passing data called parameters. I just wanted to share this example with you. So this is example of passing data called parameters into a function. And I'm really looking forward to covering that. Here's the date and time. And in this example, you can see here we have a function that we called main. And you can see we've told the code to start here. And so we're telling it to start here. We're doing 2 numbers And then we created a function called addition. And then this is telling Python to go here, addition, and then print out those number values. So we're going to talk about this and a lot more stuff. Like this is just scratching the surface of what we're going to be covering in that session. And so I really hope that all of you can join us. So I'm going to stick around for some questions for several more minutes. So I'm going to in a moment, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pause the recording, and you can stick around, ask some questions, and we can have a nice chat. And I know some things came in during the session that we would like to share with you. So please stick around. All right. Thank you all so much. Once again, big round of applause. Amazing work. I'm so happy you all could join me today. And it's been a real joy to share this session with you. And I really hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording now.